Sarachek is back. Sarachek 2022, just 12 days away. Hello everyone, my name is Akiva Poppers. Welcome in to the Max Live Sarachek 2022 seeding show, as we will reveal the top 24 teams, the 24 teams who will compete for Sarachek glory. We'll also break down the schedule for the opening day. But let's start at the top. The new format, the 24-team format, something we've never seen before in this tournament, a change in the format that hasn't been seen in a decade and a half. 24 teams competing as opposed to the old 20. What are the implications of that? So let's start with that. So in the past, obviously, there's been 4 tiers. There's been the top 8 teams playing in Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, all composed of 4 teams. The top 12 teams playing for Tier 1, the other 8 teams playing for Tier 2 and below. That changes. And it starts with no buys. The top 4 teams this year will not have any buys. Instead, on Thursday, the top 16 teams will play 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, etc. And the 17 through 24 teams will sit and wait until Friday, as they will play for Tiers 2 and 3, which will each be comprised of 8 teams. So an interesting format, definitely a twist. Very odd to see some teams not getting a chance to play until Friday when they're not top teams, but that is the format for this year. So now let's start with the seeding. It's going to start from 24, then we'll go 23 and all the way down to 1. And then at the end of the show, we will bring in Moshe Wolf, who was an SAR star back in his day, to analyze some of the awesome matchups which we will have. So let's start with 24. The number 24 seed in the tournament will be Mesivta of Philadelphia, the Mustangs, making their second appearance in Sarachek. They finished second in Tier 4 back in 2018. Jewish Hoops America, they're receiving no votes, one of just 2 teams in the tournament who are receiving no votes, and that is perhaps why they find themselves at 24. But don't fool yourselves, this team has a lot of individual talent. Ephraim Shitman is a rock. Max Miller, a tremendous shooter. They just haven't found a way to put those pieces together, coalesce as a team yet, but they'll get their shot this Sarachek to show what they are made of. Now let's go to number 23. The number 23 ranked team is Hebrew Academy of Montreal, making their 15th appearance in Sarachek, their top finish, a Tier 2 championship in 1999. Now what's very interesting about Hebrew Academy of Montreal, in Montreal there is no 12th grade, so their team is completely composed of 10th and 11th graders. It's a young team by that. And they play with a 24-second shot clock, which some see as an advantage, given the fact that in Sarachek there is a shot clock. Yeshiva League teams are not used to a shot clock. And so that could help them pull off a very surprising run. Now, with that being said, their coach, Dr. Maury Levy, great guy, spoke to him today. He said, we don't mind being Cinderella, and they've been in this position before. They were ranked 19 in Sarachek 2019. They fell just short in the Tier 4 championship game. But they're usually ranked towards the bottom of Sarachek. They're not surprised to be in this position, but they're not going to settle for being ranked 23rd. They're going to try to make a run for Tier 2 or maybe even Tier 3. Also to note, they play in the top division in GMAA in their city. So they have good competition. So we'll see where it takes them this Sarachek. Let's go to number 22. Number 22 is going to be Sky High, the Hawks from San Diego, making their 6th appearance in Sarachek, 17-5 overall this year. They play in a San Diego league which has not really given them much boost when it comes to Sarachek yet, but we'll see where they can go this year. They've never been in Tier 2, so they'll be playing on Friday for their first ever Tier 2 berth. Best finish ever was 16th a few years back. Now let's go to number 21. The number 21 ranked team, a team which has often made its way into the tournament. It's Barron of Houston, their 14th appearance. And if you look at their seedings back in 2018 and 2019, they were misseeded both times. 2018, they were ranked a little bit too high, and they had a bad tournament. In 2019, they ranked a little bit too low, and they had a good tournament. An interesting tidbit about this team, Rafi Miller, 13-year-old on this team, a 6-foot 13-year-old, the youngest player in the tournament by a year, beating out Yeshivat Makor Chaim's Yaakov Meister for that title. So who knows where this Barron team will go. The committee's had trouble dealing with them in the past. Will they make a run in Tier 2? Will they fall flat and drop to Tier 3? We shall see. Number 20. Well, I was just speaking about them. It's Yeshivat Makor Chaim from Baltimore, Maryland. Their first appearance in the tournament, and the first Baltimore, Maryland team, besides for Beth Tefillah, in the tournament since 2011, which was the Rambam Red Storms last year. This is a team I really like, and a team which could make a really surprising run in the tournament. They're coached by Harold Katz, Coach Elliot Steinmetz of Yeshiva University's mentor, and that's why they run a pure motion offense, the exact same offense that the Macs run. So look out for that. It's going to be very intriguing to see how it does against non-Baltimore teams. They've improved drastically from the start of the season. Donnie Carter, Donnie Yokin, Yaakov Meister, 3 guys to look out for on that team. They play Berman in just a few days from now, so we will see how they match up there. They lost to Berman at the beginning of the year by 10 points. So again, this is a team I like. I would not be surprised to see them pull off an upset and make their way into Tier 2. So we will see where they go. Number 19. It's going to be MIMO from Brookline, Massachusetts, making their 19th appearance. A team which is always in the tournament almost. They're 8-9 on the year. Their sophomore point guard, Renan Guertz, is their leader. Their center, Josh Sachs, quite good around the basket. They're coached by Ed Gelb, who has seen his way around this tournament, coaching Eula to championships many years ago. He's not used to having a 19 next to his name, so it'll be quite interesting to see where his team goes, given the fact that in a Tier 2 qualifier, they will be the underdog. Obviously, he does not want to see his team in Tier 3, but that is what they will do if chalk holds. So it will be fascinating to see how Coach Gelb can get his team to Tier 2, or if they will fall to Tier 3. Let's go to number 18. It's going to be a Yeshiva League team, the Hillel Heat. Hillel, some of you may not know this, but they won the championship in 1993. Since then, they have not been so great. They were quite good a few years back, and that is partially why they are in the tournament this year. This is their 5th Sarachek appearance in the Yeshiva League this year. They went 6-8, but do not let that get into your head. They lost by 2 against SAR, the best team record-wise in the Yeshiva League. They lost by 2 against Ramaz. So this is a team which has shown an ability to compete with the top teams, and they will try to pull off an upset and make their way into Tier 2. Also, keep an eye out for Elliot Braha, their leading scorer. He is quite a force and will help Hillel pull off an upset, if anyone will. And number 17, the last team which is not going to have a chance to compete for Tier 1, it's Hafter, making their first appearance since 2015, this year being a down year, 7-7 in the Yeshiva League, the first time in 17 years in which the Hawks did not make the Yeshiva League playoffs. And I spoke to their coach a few days ago. He said, we're the best team to never make the playoffs. If we get stuck in a Tier 2 qualifier, which indeed they have, it would be disappointing. We would try to win, but it would not be the same as competing for Tier 1. Obviously, in 2015, they were the runner-ups in Tier 1, losing in triple overtime to Frisch. Again, though, this is a talented team. They had high expectations coming into this year. They were not able to achieve their goals, but they do have, in my opinion, a legitimate shot to win Tier 2 if they can pull off the 17-16 upset on Day 2 of the tournament. That's the top 8 teams. Still plenty of teams to come, but let's take a commercial break. We'll be back in a couple minutes to look at the top 16 teams in the tournament. Don't go anywhere. Hello everyone, welcome back in to the Max Live Sarachek 2022 seeding show as we reveal the top 24 teams in the tournament. We already did 24 through 17. Those 8 teams we revealed will not have a chance to play for Tier 1. The next 16 teams will. So let's start at number 16, and the number 16 seed is going to be Berman from Maryland. This is a dangerous 16 seed. I do personally believe they're a little bit understated. They probably belong more around 14. Their leading scorer, Asher Falk, can drive and shoot. And earlier in the year, the Gloverman tournament, they played Ramaz and Chalhebet very tight. In my opinion, this is a team which could give the number 1 seed, who they're going to be playing on Thursday, some fits. I don't think they're going to win, but I think they can give them some difficulties. And if any team can pull off a 16-1, this team might be it. They have not hit their peak yet. And as I said before, they play Makor Chaim next week, which will be a good test for them to see if they can get in tournament shape, right, with the tournament around the corner. Let's go to number 15, which is going to be the host school, the MTA Lions, who have obviously been in this tournament every single year of its existence. They haven't won, though, since 1999, and they'll have to beat the number 2 ranked team in this tournament in order to do so. But with that said, they have done winning in other tiers. 2 consecutive championships, Tier 3 and Tier 2 in 2018 and 2019. And of course in 2019, the Yeshiva versus Yeshiva game, they knocked off Skokie Yeshiva Fastman to win Tier 2 in a tremendous comeback. They have good post play. They're 9-5, which is a solid record. That good post play is why I think they could do pretty well in Tier 2. But with that said, I would have difficulty seeing them pulling off a 2/15 upset. Let's go to number 14. Number 14 team is going to be Fuchs Mizrachi from Beechwood, Ohio. Their first year under head coach Zach Katz, a 15-4 regular season, highlighted by Ephraim Blau. A highlight reel, a walking highlight reel. I mean, this guy is a force in the paint. He dunks all the time. He's a tremendous talent, and I really want to see what he does against good competition. Fuchs won the Tansman tournament a few weeks ago. Blau won MVP. They dominated some teams. This is a pass-first offense, so it's not all surrounded around Blau. It'll be very intriguing to see how they do match up against these higher teams, because I mentioned before when we got to Mesivta at the beginning, Mesivta is not ranked in the Jewish Hoops America top 25, nor are they receiving votes. Neither is Makor Chaim. The other 22 teams are. Every single team is receiving votes besides for those 2, which means that every single team here is good and is to be looked at as dangerous. Let's go to number 13. A team which is not used to seeing a number 13 next to it. It's Eula, 4-16 on the year, a down year. They're not used to being a number 13 seed. They've only been out of Tier 1 once, and they'll have a big hill to climb to get to Tier 1 this year. And I would argue with that 4-16 record, you could argue they should be lower, but 13 is a solid place of slotting them in. It should be noted, with the fact that they have never been out of Tier 1 and the fact that they always bring a rowdy fan base, they are capable of upsetting a higher seed early on. This is a team which I think could have one of 2 pulls in this tournament. They could upset a team early on, make their way to Tier 1, or they could even lose in a Tier 2 qualifier and fall to Tier 3. Eula, obviously, the gemstone in this tournament. 78 overall wins, most of all time. They've won 8 championships, but none since 2014. Number 12 is going to be the Kings of Tier 2, as they are kindly known, the Ida Crown Aces. 13-7 on the year, making their 24th appearance. They won the Tier 1 championship 14 years ago, but they have not done their damage in Tier 1 since. They've done their damage in Tier 2, winning 3 championships in the last few Saracheks. So this is a team, while obviously they have a big hill to climb, number 5 seed to beat to get the Tier 1. Do not be surprised if they make some noise in Tier 2 and win that championship. I think 12 is a good place to slot them. Let's go to number 11, which is going to be Yavne from Dallas, 24-4 on the year, making their first appearance since 2014. Now, they've never finished in the top 3. I don't think they're going to finish in the top 3 this year, but this is a team which I think could make some noise. Now, looking at their roster, there are some discrepancies between the roster which we got and the Max Preps roster in terms of height. And being a guy who hasn't watched Yavne as they're in Dallas much, I'm not really sure if their guys are 6'6 or 6'2. Guess we'll have to find out on the court. So that'll be something to look out for. Noah Ohayon and Hillel Beinash are the two players I really like on this team. Hillel Beinash, Ezra Beinash, an YU graduate brother, and obviously he's made his way up the ranks. Yavne was going to be a team which could make some noise in 2020 before that tournament was canceled. And so in 2022, they'll have their chance against a 6 seed to make their way into Tier 1. Something I do like about this team, defensively, they have a great press. And that could help them pull off an upset. Or, who knows, maybe they'll falter and make their way into Tier 3. Only time will tell. Let's go to number 10. It's going to be Magen David, a team which were the runner-ups in 2019, losing to Shalhevet. This is a team which is not as good, obviously, as they were in 2019. They finished 9-5 in the Yeshiva League, Ostermaz in the quarterfinals. But this is a classic Magen David team. Excellent in transition. That's always where they are their strongest. They're a quick team which can get out on the break, and they typically generate many steals per game. And that's what's going to decide whether or not they win or lose several games. Look out for their 10v7 matchup, which we will go over very shortly. And now to number 9, the last team which will be considered the underdog in their Tier 1 qualifier matchup on Thursday. It's going to be Katz, Yeshiva High School from Boca Raton, Florida, making their 19th appearance. 8-5 overall. They've never finished in the top 3 of the tournament. Obviously, they had their glory days when Ethan Lasko was there. But keep an eye on Jonathan Levy, their 6'4 guard, who I think could be a big factor if they want to make noise in this tournament. Obviously, they'll have to beat a number 8 team in order to make their way into Tier 1. That deals with 16 through 9, leaving only 8 through 1 left, which means don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in a couple minutes to reveal those teams.
My story started with a letter in the mail.
I took my first steps in New York and felt the energy all around me.
I connected with my Rebbe on the first day of Shir.
My story was learning that the mitochondria is more than just the powerhouse of the cell.
I made my painting from scratch, like really from scratch.
My roommates came here from 4 different countries. We lit one menorah together.
My story was practice every night.
Chavruta every night.
Subway rides, city lights.
In my story, my name was in the headlines.
The bylines.
The University Museum.
My story was my internship at the Supreme Court.
Dancing with the Israeli flag in Times Square.
My story was participating in the only hackathon, not on Shabbat.
The Career Center found me my first job at a top business analytics firm.
My story was becoming best friends with my chavruta.
And holding that NCAA trophy.
My story started here.
My story is just beginning.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the Max Live Sarachek 2020. I'm going to get it right one of these days. 2022 seeding show. It's a tough number to pronounce. Let's do the 8 through 1 teams in this tournament, starting with number 8, making their first appearance since 1998. It's Flatbush. Flatbush, the Falcons from Brooklyn. Their second appearance ever in this tournament, 9-5 in the Yeshiva League. They played TABC tight twice, and they split with DRS. And you know what that means? It means keep an eye on them to pull off an upset. This is a talented team. Look at Azar and Shaya to make some noise for them. And just like Magen David, the other Brooklyn team in this tournament, they're very quick. They thrive in transition, but they also have a few guys who can hit from deep, which means trailers on 3, look out for them. This is a team which we don't know so much about on the big stage. So we'll have to see how they do against number 9 Cats in their first game to see if they can get into Tier 1 and get a matchup against the number 1 team in Sarachek. Let's go to number 7. It's going to be Ramaz, the Rams, making their first appearance since 2010, in which they were invited as the reigning champions, winning in 2009. And there's a very interesting thing to note here. In 2009, they played without their seniors because they were on a senior trip. They outscored their opponents in those games 163-98 by an all-junior team winning Tier 1. And this year, they also have a similar situation, but not exactly. The roster only has 9 players. A few guys are not going to be able to make it to Sarachek. And so we'll see if they can pull off similar magic, although their top 4 guys will be in Sarachek. 12-2 in the Yeshiva League, coming out of nowhere, if you want to say so. They're in the Yeshiva League semifinals, which will be occurring this week. Their star, Julius Rubenstein, a 3-point sharpshooter. So who knows what Ramaz will bring on the big stage. Obviously, in the Yeshiva League, they've excelled this year. Let's go to number 6, which is going to be Frisch, the Cougars, who I believe are the most talented team in the Yeshiva League. Now, that doesn't mean they're the best, but it means that I think they're the most talented. Ben Haber, Alex Zakheim, and Johnny Levine highlight a deep team which beat DRS in the quarterfinals to make their way into the Yeshiva League semifinals. With that said, they've had their downs this year. They lost 5 games in the Yeshiva League, which is why they're only at number 6, but they're hitting their stride at the right time. What will really come down to, in my opinion, as to whether or not Frisch will be able to make a run in this tournament is if they can play as a team or if they'll get a little too ISO hero ball centric, and that remains to be seen. Number 5, that's going to be the 2-time reigning Sarachek champions, Shalhevet, from Los Angeles, California. This is their lowest seed in the last 5 years, having made 4 consecutive visits to the championship game. Avi Halpert's the guy on this team to look out for. Pure shooting ability, and he can also facilitate. This guy is arguably the most talented player in Sarachek. Now, they played, obviously, in Globerman, the tournament they host, and they got blown out by TABC at the beginning of the year, but they've had a strong season, and it's Shalhevet, and that means look out for them. They're going to be a threat to win it all again. Number 4, the team which will have to face Shalhevet if both are victorious in their Tier 1 qualifiers, DRS, the Wildcats, who, as I said a few minutes ago, lost to Frisch in the Yeshiva League quarterfinals. They've been a dominant team all year. That was their first loss since November, and they beat SAR, SAR's only blemish, by 23 points, pressing them into oblivion. Isaac Solomon and Ezra Dubin are the guys to look out for on this team. DRS, as always, a top team in the Yeshiva League. It'll be interesting to see if they can recover from that loss to Frisch, or if they'll fall and never get back. Number 3, as we get into the top 3 rankings, it's going to be TABC, 10-4 in the Yeshiva League, with 2 losses each to Frisch and to SAR. And with them being seeded 3, that means that if Chalk holds, they'll face number 6 Frisch in the Tier 1 quarterfinals. So, man, that could be a rematch for the ages. Yis Kamenetsky, Shmuel Yablok, and Harry Erlinsky are the highlights of this team, which is very balanced, defense-oriented, and team-oriented. They won Globerman, as I mentioned, destroying Shalhevet in the championship game. They've never made a Sarachek championship game, and let's see if they can do that this year. Again, multiple scoring threats. They're currently in the Yeshiva League semifinals. Unclear if that coalesced team will be able to put on their first ever Sarachek championship run. That leaves just 2 teams left, which means that the teams at this point are hoping their names are not called. So let's go to number 2. That's going to be Valley Torah from Valley Village, California, 30-4, making the state regional championship game, but losing by 14 to Scripps Ranch. But on that run, they beat the number 1 seed and obviously moved their way up the rankings. Johnny Dan is the man to look out for. A guy, along with Avi Halpert, who I could argue is the best player in this tournament. They beat Eula by 17 earlier in the year. They've never won a Sarachek championship, losing to Shalhevet a few years ago. If they can avenge that loss, that would be amazing for them. And in order to do it, they'll have to make their way to the championship game, as Shalhevet and Valley Torah cannot match up until the championship game as the 2 versus 5. This is a physical team, a tough team, one which will dive on every ball, and one which absolutely could win Sarachek. Which leaves just one team which is obviously SAR. The Sting, 13-1, best record in Yeshiva League and currently in the Yeshiva League semifinals. Their blowout loss to DRS, was their only loss of the year. They defeated every other team they played. They didn't play in any tournaments, however, and we'll see if that will bite them down the stretch. Hyman's their leading scorer, Brody, their center, a tremendous finisher around the basket, and something very interesting about this team is that they have 4 juniors in their rotation, so look out for what could be a 2-year run. This is a good shooting team, a patient team, a disciplined team, a smart team, one which plays man-to-man defense most of the time, which you love to see, as opposed to a lot of teams which play zone, obviously one which could win it all. So there you go. Those are the 24 teams, but we're not done yet because we still have to look at the Tier 1 quarter qualifier matchups for Thursday, as well as the potential matchups which we could get on Friday. We'll bring in Moshe Wolf, an SAR alum, to give his thoughts as well on those matchups. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back as we wrap up this show soon.
My story started with a letter in the mail.
I took my first steps in New York and felt the energy all around me.
I connected with my Rebbe on the first day of Shir.
My story was learning that the mitochondria is more than just the powerhouse of the cell.
I made my painting from scratch. Like, really from scratch.
My roommates came here from 4 different countries. We lit one menorah together.
My story was practice every night.
Chavruta every night.
Subway rides, city lights.
In my story, my name was in the headlines.
The bylines.
The University Museum.
My story was my internship at the Supreme Court.
Dancing with the Israeli flag in Times Square.
My story was participating in the only hackathon not on Shabbat.
The Career Center found me my first job at a top business analytics firm.
My story was becoming best friends with my chavrita.
And holding that NCAA trophy.
My story started here.
My story is just beginning.
When I was in 9th grade, someone told me to give up on ball. He told me, basketball will only take you so far in life. You're not going to make it to the NBA, he said. What he was missing is that making it to the NBA isn't the only reason why we play. The game of basketball leaves you with so much more than just the game itself. The life lessons and friendships that are made while playing the game will outlive the game and can last a lifetime.
Welcome back into the Max Live Sarachek 2022 seeding show, as we have just revealed the top 24 teams, their rankings, their seedings in Sarachek as they flash on the bottom of your screen. So now let's take a look at the implications of these seedings, what the matchups are going to be, and let's analyze those matchups. So let's take a look at the bracket. We see here, top left, we've got SAR against Berman. And obviously, the winner of that game will play the winner of the Flatbush against Cats game. DRS and EULA play. They'll play at 7 p.m., the prime time matchup. And they'll get Shalhevet or Ida Crown, the winner of that game, who will play immediately afterwards. TABC and Fuchs will play at 4 o'clock. And they'll play the winner of Frisch versus Yavne. Ramaz and Magen David will play at 11:30. And they'll play the winner of Valley Torah versus MTA. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see the other potential matchups that we get outside of Tier 1, the losers and who they would face. So because in this tournament there's going to be no reseeding, that means that the loser of the 8 versus 9 game will play Philadelphia, the loser of the 1 versus 16 game will play Hafter, etc. So there's an assumption essentially in the seedings that the better team will win, the worst team will lose. And then, let's say that means 16 is going to lose to the 1, so then 16 gets 17. So even if the 1 beats the 16, the 17 will have to play the 1. So now I'm going to bring in Moshe Wolf, SAR star back in his day, and we're going to break down some of these matchups. So, Moshe, let's take a look at the Thursday games. Which ones do you want to take a look at here to start?
Poppers, thank you very much for having me. So I'd say, just first of all, would not say star back in the day. I would say I was mainly there for my height. But just look at two key matchups for the first round that I would say are definitely looking out for. We should say is the Flatbush Falcons playing against the Magen David Warriors. That's a game that they faced each other back in the quarterfinals, as you previously mentioned. I'm sorry, I mixed that up. I think Ramaz. Sorry, sorry about that. Ramaz is playing the Magen David Warriors, and Ramaz actually just beat Ramaz beat Magen David by 8 points. So obviously that's a matchup to watch out for there. Magen David's definitely looking to come back. I would say, as you previously mentioned, we have a new format here for this year that the top 4 teams no longer have a bye. So I would say that a key matchup to watch also is SAR versus Berman. You mentioned how Berman has Asher Falk, very versatile scorer. So obviously there, SAR's got to be prepared. They're already focused on their upcoming semifinal matchup versus TABC. So Berman has a lot of time to focus on this upcoming game in Sarachek. And I would say the hypothetical second round options that we have here for two key matchups I think to focus on. First of all, TABC Frisch is a potential option, which obviously neighboring schools in Jersey. Great teams overall, very deep teams, great starting 5. They would definitely face each other. They had 2 close games this year. A 5-point overtime loss for TABC and I think another 6-point loss there. So obviously TABC ranked higher actually than Frisch, which is definitely a fair ranking. So they obviously are very tight in terms of competition, and that will definitely be a close matchup. And I would say that the other option here is DRS Shalhevet is going to be a great matchup. Shalhevet obviously very well coached. They've been to the finals before. This is a team that incorporates all 4 grades in a lot of their teams. So these are guys with experience. These are guys that want to come back. They've won, I think, the past 2 championships, if I'm not mistaken. So these are guys that really know how to win. And DRS, obviously, unfortunate loss the other night, heartbreaking loss. And they want to come here and win. They were the number 1 team in the Yeshiva League at a point for that reason exactly. And yeah, they are preparing very heavily for that great state coast-to-coast matchup.
So let's take a look at that Frisch against TABC potential matchup, because that's one I really want to highlight as obviously the lower seed, the not as good team. Frisch beat TABC twice. What do you think Frisch did well in those games? Why do you think they match up well with TABC? And who do you think would win a rematch?
So I think, as you mentioned, Frisch is probably one of the, if not the most talented team in the Yeshiva League. Obviously, Zach Heim is a junior star, and he's going to be here for 2 years, so he will be back here next year as well. And they offer a lot of shooting. Levine is obviously a great shooter also. Haber's a great shooter. They have a lot of key role players there. So I think in terms of if you have a team like that has a lot of star power, if they're able to mesh well together, get the shots that they want, take the right shots, as long as that's going well for them and they move the ball around well. So obviously I think that's where they have that advantage there. TABC, I think overall is a team that just plays very hard. They have good shooters. They look to shoot a lot of threes. They push the ball in and they kick out, and they play hard defensively. So obviously they're a team that can go up against anybody. That's why they have their number 3 ranking. And I would say that is the key to watch out between them is obviously just depending on who can mesh better. TABC happens to mesh very well together. They work the ball around very well, get good looks. So it really just be.
And looking at the DRS against Shalhevet matchup, what role do you think the DRS loss to Frisch will play in this? Because as a player, obviously, you've experienced some highs and lows. So coming off a low and going into Sarachek, having to play Eula first, which obviously could be a difficult game potentially, and then likely having to play Shalhevet, a team which does not expect to lose pretty much in this tournament. Mm-hmm. How do you come back from that loss against Frisch?
So I would just be assuming now, if it were me there, these are guys that are going to be in the gym nonstop at DRS. They're going to be practicing for the next 12 days until Sarachek as much as they can to prepare for Shalhevet. Shalhevet obviously comes out with a lot of different variations of game plans. I remember when we played them, they took a lot of charges, which is something you didn't necessarily see in the Yeshiva League. So they play a very sophisticated brand of basketball, I would say. So that's something they have to prepare for. DRS, typically what I've seen is they have a very good press. The problem here is that obviously their court at DRS is a little bit smaller than the YU court. So just to be able to apply that here could be a little more interesting to see if it actually works. But yeah, I think these are guys that are going to be motivated. Obviously, they're the 1 seed for a reason. They have a great work ethic. They knew how to win games. Unfortunate, they had a 1-point loss against a very good Frisch team that's on the rise now. But they are going to be working nonstop for sure to try and beat Shalhevet in that second round if it happens.
And then any potential intriguing matchups on the lower levels?
So on the lower levels,
I've got one I want to take a look at, obviously.
Let us know, obviously.
Okay, let's start with Eula against Makorheim, which would be Makorheim's first game in the tournament. I don't know what to expect in this game because Makorheim's going to be playing, first of all, not on Thursday, where Eula has played on Thursday, which means they won't be able to get used potentially to the 3-point line, which is tricky, obviously, here. And it'll be their first game in a crazy environment. I mean, this school has like 30 or 40 kids in it, so they're not really used to the big environment yet. And Eula, obviously, on a down year, and potentially having just lost to DRS, which is the scenario which we're reviewing right now. How does that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Makorheim, obviously, if you don't have that Thursday game, it's very difficult to adjust. Getting used to the court, the shot clock, the atmosphere here with all the fans. I would say Eula obviously will have that. I mean, it's very difficult in terms of a lot of the matchups. We haven't really seen these teams play each other ever. In Makorheim, it's their first year. There's obviously going to be a lot of pressure. I think that also takes a little bit away that they don't have any necessarily expectations, meaning they can go and play their game of ball and just hope that it works out well, and they'll just come in and play hard. So yeah, I would.
And then, what are your expectations in terms of where you think this is going to go? Which teams stick out to you right now as the teams who should be considered the favorites, given the matchups in play?
Given the matchups in play, I mean, I would say obviously right now the Yeshiva League semifinals is still going on. It's about to happen this week. So I would say right away you have SAR, TABC, Frisch, and Ramaz respectively in terms of the rankings. These are all teams that have shown they can play. They have great lineups, star players, obviously, and they're guys that just can go out and win any game possible. They've had losses, though, that indicate that this is a tournament that anyone can win, meaning SAR had an unfortunate loss by over 20 to DRS earlier this year where they broke down in terms of against the press, things like that. So obviously, playing a good Berman team, you never know what could happen in the first round. But those are the 4 teams I would say. DRS, obviously, also you have to throw in there. Those are 5 teams. Shalhevet and Valley Torah also are obviously up there for a reason. Those are, I would say, there's a bunch of good teams. It's a very exciting year for sure.
In terms of matchups, do you like Valley Torah's path here? Having to play Ramaz or Magen David, and then having to play TABC or Frisch? Or do you like Shalhevet's path better? If we're just looking at the California teams and their potential matchups. I think that it's very intriguing because you might look at the games and say, hey, I think TABC and Frisch by the eye test might even be better than SAR and DRS, where the records indicate otherwise, right? So as the 1 and the 4, Shalhevet would be the one facing the SAR DRS of the world, and TABC and Frisch, the teams which have the results, obviously the big upset in Gloverman, and then the talent in Frisch. Which of those 2 teams, Valley Torah or Shalhevet, do you think has the better path?
Yeah, so both very difficult paths, obviously. I would say Shalhevet having to play DRS, as I mentioned. DRS is going to be a good team, so that's obviously not the most ideal path to be going through when you have to play a team that was the number 1 at a point. Valley Torah, though, the option to have to play Ramaz and then also have to play after that TABC or Frisch is a very difficult matchup. You're talking about 2 very good teams that can win any game when it's thrown at them and they play their game of ball. So it's very difficult to say. Honestly, I would have to say Shalhevet would probably adjust better, and having to only face DRS as opposed to the potential of facing 2 semifinal current teams in the Yeshiva League would probably be a slightly easier, but overall both very difficult paths for every team.
All right. Thank you very much, Moshe. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that will wrap up our show, which means that for the next 12 days, stay tuned to maxlive.com, MaxLive social media, Instagram, and Twitter. For all updates and information, we'll have our Sarachek 2022 website up very shortly, where you'll be able to see rosters, where you can see stats, where you can view articles, where you can look at the teams. It's going to be a very exciting tournament. All the action you can find on maxlive.com and on MaxLive's YouTube channel. So that'll wrap it up for tonight. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good night.
Have a good night.